Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email, by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal, or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone, including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
Hello, I'm Linda Ross, a Program Specialist with Texas Workforce Commission's Adult Education and Literacy Department. Today we're going to dive into an exciting new chapter for our students, one that focuses on opening doors to success for every adult learner. We'll explore some key changes and information for this program year that'll help us better serve our AEL students. Areas will include an overview of the comprehensive assessment, alternative placement requirements and information, scenarios that illustrate the use of an alternative placement test, as well as reference resources for more information. Before we dive further into alternative placement tests, let's talk about the building blocks and foundation for success known as the comprehensive assessment. Comprehensive assessment is more than just determining eligibility. It's about understanding the whole learner. A thorough comprehensive assessment helps identify a student's goals, needs, their background, potential challenges, and the necessary supports to overcome those challenges. This approach ensures every adult learner is on the right path, leading to better retention, program completion, goal achievement, and overall program success. To ensure a smooth and effective comprehensive assessment process, a clear and detailed SOP is crucial. This SOP should be a living document, updated as needed to reflect best practices and program needs. Essential components include the enrollment form with the signed release of information, identity and eligibility documentation, digital literacy and equity questionnaire, the iCheck plan, which outlines the student's short-term and long-term goals, including the MSG the student should achieve by the end of the program year, testing and placement administration of appropriate tests, which can be either NRS approved or alternative placement test for the student's initial placement. Supportive service needs determination. AEL providers must assess each student's need for support services, for example, transportation and childcare. Providers should make appropriate referrals to help ensure the student's program completion. Partnership with organizations like Workforce Solutions can provide these services. Alternative placement provides flexibility for AEL providers to leverage non-NRS approved tests for specific scenarios. This approach is intended to help providers better align assessment with student goals and diverse needs. Here are some potential uses. Transition to college, GED preparation, workplace literacy, improving job-related skills and boosting career prospects, integrated education and training, supporting learners to gain knowledge for specific careers. Alternative placement tests are powerful, but it's essential to use them thoughtfully. Here are some important points. Alternative placement tests are designed for learners who are best suited for non-NRS approved tests after a thorough comprehensive assessment. It's essential that the test aligns with the student's specific goals and situation. Alternative placement tests must be content or performance-driven assessments, offering a way to gauge the student's skills in a way that traditional tests may not. It's important to know alternative placement tests cannot be used for measuring MSG Type 1A, pre-post-test gain. A low alternative placement score may indicate, though, that the best plan MSG is, in fact, an MSG Type 1A, which requires an NRS-approved test. Choosing between traditional assessments and alternative placement tests requires thoughtful consideration. The goal is to make the right choice for each learner, ensuring their success. Here are some factors to consider when deciding on alternative placement. Does the student have a valid NRS-approved test in teams? Does the alternative test align with the student's individual goals? Can the student realistically achieve their planned MSG within the remaining program year? What is the student's ability and learning level at the time of intake? Are there any challenges or obstacles that may hinder the student's progress? How intensive is the class instruction? Consider the number of days and hours per week. And is there a clear plan in place to support the student's goals and MSG achievement? Using alternative placement without a careful planning can potentially limit the student's progress and success. It's crucial to ensure a well-defined plan to guide the journey. Let's be clear, we're not replacing NRS-approved tests. They remain a critical part of the assessment process. Alternative placement tests are used when a valid NRS-approved test isn't the best fit for a learner. It's important to know that TEAMS prioritizes the most recent valid NRS-approved test results within a 365-day window. You will not be able to enter an alternative placement test in TEAMS when the student already has a valid NRS-approved test. Programs can, however, manually track alternative placement test details, and just like NRS-approved tests, copies must be placed in the student file. In addition to the comprehensive assessment SOP, providers must develop a written alternative placement policy that outlines the procedures for using alternative tests. This policy is essential to ensure compliance and effective service delivery and account for the students' time in the program, their goals, and the planned MSG. The policy should clearly define the process for how eligibility is determined. It should be a consistent process for determining if a student qualifies for AEL services. What TWC-approved alternative placement test will be used? What are the specific situations where alternative placement is appropriate to use? What is the process for tracking and monitoring the student's progress? And are there any restrictions on the use of alternative placement tests? It's also important to know that providers are solely responsible for determining AEL service eligibility before enrollment. Always follow the rules set by test publishers. Test rules govern how to score tests and how long they remain valid. TEAMS does not track alternative placement tests' cutoff scores. Alternative placement tests are valid for a specified period determined by the test publisher. For example, TSIA scores are valid for 5 years. Test cutoff scores and publisher validity sunset dates are not tracked in TEAMS, so manual tracking is required. Adherence to the testing guide and administration policies for approved tests are monitored by TWC's Subrecipient Monitoring Department. You can refer to the TWC AEL Alternative Placement Approved Test slides in the presentation for publisher websites with test score and validity information. Now let's address the important topic of eligibility. As stated before, providers are solely responsible for determining eligibility before enrollment. When using alternative placement tests to determine eligibility, ensure that students meet one of the following requirements as outlined in WIOA Section 203, subsection 4. Student is 16 years of age or older, meets age-related eligibility requirements, and is not enrolled or required to be enrolled in school under state law, and meets one of these criteria. Is basic skills deficient? The individual function at less than a secondary school completion level. Lacks high school diploma or recognized equivalent. Or is an English language learner who has limited ability in reading, writing, speaking, or understanding the English language, and whose native language is not English, or who lives in a family or community environment where language other than English is the dominant language. Although alternative placement tests aren't meant to decide eligibility for services, some tests, like the TABE locator test and TSIA, can help us determine if a student meets basic skills deficiency requirements for AEL eligibility. For example, a TSIA score of 3 or below meets AEL eligibility requirements. Employer-identified or industry-specific content exams do not address AEL eligibility criteria. They assess job-specific skills. Providers must identify how eligibility will be determined. Scores on alternative placement tests like TABE Locator, TSIA, and AccuPlacer can confirm basic skills deficiency, therefore eligibility for AEL services. I'll use Janet as a student example to describe this scenario. Janet did not score high on her TSI math exam, showing she needs help with math. Her TSIA score of 3 is the documentation needed to prove eligibility. Janet can enroll in a math prep program to improve her math skills. Remember to add eligibility information to the student's team's participant notes. In this example, Janet is currently not enrolled in any college credit classes. This means that MSG Type 1C, entry into post-secondary, is a possible planned MSG option for her. Let's meet another student. For this example, Marge. Marge is 18 and wants to get her high school equivalency. She self-identified as lacking a high school diploma or equivalent, and she meets 16 to 18-year-old age-related eligibility requirements. She also supplied the age-related required documents for an 18-year-old. Marge's enrollment form and her required age-related documents are proof for eligibility documentation. Once again, please be sure to enter eligibility information in the student's participant notes. This list contains. Now let's talk about English language learners. For this scenario, David will be our student example. David is a recent immigrant who wants to improve his English so he can communicate with his new neighbors and find a better job. David identified himself as an ELL on his enrollment form. He also had difficulty completing a basic ELL screening tool. Both his enrollment form and the screening tool form can be used as evidence to show he's eligible. This example of the team's participant note states, student self-identified as an English language learner on the enrollment form also struggled to complete the screening form. This list contains TWC AEL approved alternative placement tests. These tests have been carefully selected for their reliability and alignment with program goals, and they assess a wide range of skills from academic readiness to job-related competencies. As previously stated, providers must follow test publisher guidelines. Source links are provided. The DRC tape locator scoring information follows on the next slide. TWC will continuously evaluate and update our approved test to ensure we provide the most relevant and effective assessment tools for our providers and their students. This page shows the TABE 1112 and 1314 locator scoring, as well as expiration information. This information was directly provided by Data Recognition Corporation. Teams is our online system that helps track student progress and manage programs. It's a crucial tool for ensuring accountability and efficiency. The highlighted tests on the right of this slide are alternative placement tests that appear on the Teams Test Detail instrument dropdown. Let's clarify how alternative placement works for current and new students. Current students with valid NRS-approved tests do not need to take an alternative placement test. Remember, Teams won't allow an alternative placement test entry in Teams when the student has an NRS-approved test within 365 days. As mentioned earlier, programs can still use alternative placement if it is the best fit for the situation and meets student goals. In those instances, manual tracking of a student's alternative placement test details is required. New students or current students who have an expired NRS-approved test in Teams or no test in Teams can have alternative placement test details entered into Teams. In this instance, the only manual tracking required is the alternative placement test publisher's cutoff scores and expiration dates, as Teams does not track this information. Here are some post-testing considerations. 1. Post-testing is not required if the student's planned MSG is one of the following: 1C, 1D, or 2 through 5. However, post-testing is required if the planned MSG is a type 1A, pre-post test gain. Remember, MSG type 1A is not an option for alternative placement. Here are some additional aspects with regards to Teams. There is flexibility. Students can still take an NRS-approved test later if needed. If you change a student's test mid-program year, you must add the student to a mirror class to ensure new test instrument is recognized by Teams. A mirror class is an identical copy of an existing class, except for the test instrument assigned to the student before their first class hour is recorded in Teams. A testing instrument is required to place students in a class. Teams uses the most recent NRS-approved test within 365 days. Alternative placement tests don't expire in Teams, and cutoff scores are not tracked. A Teams release planned for the end of January will add alternative placement students to the MSG Management Report. Alternative placement accumulated test hours are tracked in Teams, but they don't apply to alternative placement tests. The accumulated testing hour requirements do, however, apply for post-testing with NRS-approved tests. Here are some alternative placement questions we've received along with the answers. If you have additional questions, please contact ALTA@twc.texas.gov. This section showcases alternative placement scenarios. Each scenario explores the specific testing and placement process being considered. Relevant details about the student's background and circumstances, the student's desired learning outcomes and goals, the best possible MSG option based on the student's situation, and how the student's eligibility was determined. These are examples that don't include using NRS-approved tests. You should always consider the student's individual situation to choose the right placement tool, learning path, and planned MSG. Meet Sandy. Sandy is a dedicated student who wants to earn her GED. Her goal is to pass her math exam. Sandy has passed 3 GED sections and enrolled in AEL on May 1st. She scored 143 on her GED Ready Practice math test. Sandy's test scores show us that she'll soon be ready for the math exam. We'll use her practice test to determine her placement and help her achieve her GED. The best MSG option in this instance is an MSG Type 2 HSE attainment. Eligibility was determined when Sandy self-identified on her enrollment form that she did not have a high school diploma or equivalent, and she met age-related eligibility requirements. Let's meet another GED student, Bruce. Bruce's goal is to pass his remaining math and science GED sections. He is a current student and has been enrolled in AEL since last program year. Bruce recently notified his instructors that he is moving to Arizona in October. Bruce took his GED Ready practice test in July and scored a 90 in math and 138 in science. The best MSG option in this case would be an MSG Type 1D, passing one HSE exam content area. His AEL eligibility was determined by his enrollment form when he self-identified as not having a high school diploma or equivalent. Here's Michael. Michael's a new student determined to earn his HSE. He enrolled in an AEL HSE Fast Track program on May 15th. His GED Ready practice test scores are 140, 139, 129, and 110. We can see that Michael is close to achieving his goal, and his practice tests provide valuable information to guide his placement and support his journey. The best MSG option for Michael is an MSG Type 1D, passing one HSE exam content area. Eligibility was determined when Michael self-identified on his enrollment form as not having a high school diploma or equivalent. Meet John, a student who wants to go to college. John wants to enroll in a college credit math class, but his TSIA math score isn't high enough yet. He enrolled in AEL on April 15th. He is not enrolled in any English college credit classes, even though his ELAR TSIA score would have met college eligibility requirements. We used his TSIA math test to identify his strengths and areas for improvement. John's best MSG option is an MSG Type 1C, entry into post-secondary, and his AEL eligibility was determined by his TSIA math score. Liam is a great example of how alternative placement tests can help learners succeed in the workforce. Liam's goal is to gain math skill competency so he can be promoted and receive an increase in salary. Liam's workplace literacy class starts in October. He has his high school diploma. The best MSG option for Liam is an MSG Type 4, Progress Toward Milestone. Please remember, it is required that the employer define the milestone prior to his workplace literacy class start date, and the milestone must be included in the provider's MOU with the employer. The tape locator for math content or the TSIA math exam can be used to determine AEL eligibility. Anna is an amazing example of how AEL programs can support learners pursuing specific career paths Anna's goal is to become a certified nurse's assistant. She enrolled in AL ESL classes in February and began a CNA program in April. Anna has a high school credential from Brazil and took a CNA certification practice test to identify her job-related skill gaps when she started the CNA program. In this case, the best MSG option for Anna is an MSG Type 5, Skills Progression. Her eligibility was determined by her enrollment form when she self-identified as an English language learner. Anna's story showcases the power of AEL programs to support learners in any field. As this example shows, we can use alternative placement tests to identify strengths and areas for improvement, helping to ensure the students achieve their career goals. Additional information regarding alternative placement to help you navigate the new guidelines and implement them successfully in your AEL program can be found at the following resource URLs. These resources include TWC AEL Testing Guide, Performance Guide, Companion Guide, as well as Octave Program Memo 17-2, and a link to many WIOA and NRS resources and tools. Thank you for your time. As always, we're here to support you. If you have any questions or need help navigating these new guidelines, please contact us at aelta@twc.texas.gov.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCAL continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.